So, holy cow, hi everyone. This is amazing to see so many people come out and show an interest in learning more about this project and making your voices heard. I'm Mira Shanker. I work in the Public Engagement and Communications group at Waterfront Toronto, and I'll be your MC for the evening. And again, thank you so much to everyone who took the time out of their evening to be here with us. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping, just so everyone knows, we're live streaming to Facebook right now, so hello to the possibly 1 to 2 people on Facebook who are watching this. But it's also going to be saved and published, so it will be available for people who want to watch the presentation who weren't able to be here. I want to just quickly acknowledge a few people who are here tonight. We have Bridget Shim, a member of our design review panel at Waterfront Toronto, and Betsy Williamson, who is the co-chair of our design review panel at Waterfront Toronto. Mark Wilson is also here. He's our former board chair at Waterfront Toronto and also the founder of Bring Back the Dawn, which obviously played a huge role in all of the events that led us here tonight. I also want to welcome MP Julie DeBrusen, MP for Toronto Danforth. Thank you for being here with us tonight. And Councillor Paula Fletcher, City of Toronto, your local councillor. I'd like to ask Councillor Fletcher to come up and say a few welcoming remarks to get us started, if I could.
Thank you. Thank you, Mira. And I know many of us have been together at so many of these functions. And I haven't been at one of these since Pam died. And Pam and I always used to come to these and speak and see the fantastic work that's been done by Waterfront Toronto and supported by all of you. So I just wanted to take a moment and recognize her tremendous work in support of Toronto's waterfront and transforming our city here tonight. And this, for many, is simply a dream come true. I was speaking to Julie Beddoes, longtime waterfront activist who's been at this for 20 years. So good job, Julie. Who else has been at it for 20 years? Put up your hand. Let's give a big cheer for the 20-year club. And I have been at this since 2004 when we initiated the environmental assessment for this fantastic project at City Hall under Mayor Miller and completed the environmental assessment in 2009 under Mayor Miller, who, as you know, was a tremendous waterfront activist and advocate for this project. Then we hit another mayor and we went through a challenge to the EA, and eventually we ended up today with our EA was approved in 2015, and I really want to thank the federal and provincial governments for adding the funding to our city funding to make this dream come true. All 3 levels of government with multi-millions of dollars to transform this part of our city and create a brand new Villiers Island and a great new park. It's 100 acres. It's quite big. It is very challenging, as you'll hear, as far as due diligence and infrastructure is concerned. And let's add the other projects to it, the Gardner, the Smart Track, and Downtown Relief Line, Waterfront Transit. This is a transformative part of our city. It's being transformed and will be transformed in front of our very eyes. So thank you to each and every one of you who've spent time making this dream come true, being part of the process, and I really am excited about seeing this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And I'd also like to ask MP DeBrusen to come up and say a few words, if she doesn't mind.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. It's amazing to be here. I've paddled the Dawn. I don't know how many of you here have paddled the Dawn. Yeah, a whole bunch of you. That's amazing. And there's that experience when you get to the Keating Channel and you just stop. You stop at that wall. And it's such a harsh moment when you've paddled through this beautiful riverway and then you hit the wall. And now we're at this moment where we're within a stone's throw, time that we're going to be able to paddle all the way out to our lake and to experience our lake. And what a beautiful day that's going to be. So this year is the 25th anniversary Paddle the Dawn. but soon enough, we're going to be celebrating, and we're going to have a wonderful celebration when we paddle all the way out to the lake. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of you there for that. It was an amazing day just last spring when we were able to go and meet the 3 orders of government and to announce the funding that had finally been made. It's really cooperation between all 3 orders of government to be able to help funding for the naturalization of the mouth of the Don River. And what I would like to say, though, is that that really builds upon the advocacy and the activism of so many of you here in this room and other people who might not be here today, but there are people who have been pushing and pushing all the way to make this happen. So seeing everyone out here and seeing all of these beautiful designs is really a tribute to community building and people persevering and pushing through, and then today we get to see it happen. So I'm very excited to see how we see all these consultations coming through and all these designs. I like to kind of picture where we're going to place ourselves and all of that. But this is an amazing time for our city, and it's an amazing time for us to all come together and to be able to really dream about what we're going to be able to see in the Portlands. Thank you for all coming out today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to move into 2 presentations. So just to give everyone a sense of what's going to go on, we have Waterfront Toronto here, staff here to give an introduction and some project background. And then we have our team from Michael van Valkenburg and Associates here to talk you through their proposed design for the park spaces that you've all been walking around and hopefully learning a little bit about. I want to just also give a welcome to Adam Vaughn, MP for Trinity Spadina, who snuck in and I didn't see him, and also our former CEO, John Campbell, who I'm told also snuck in without my noticing. So without wasting your time with me being up here talking to you anymore, I would love to bring up David Christern, our Chief Project Officer, and Chris Glasik, our SVP of Planning and Design, to get the presentation started.
Thanks, Mira. Welcome, everybody. I'm not a 20-year person, but I am a 13-year person on this project. And for those of you who don't know, this whole event is titled Portlands Flood Protection. The Portlands are a very large area that many people in Toronto are not that familiar with, and yet it is, as you can see in this picture on the lower right, is the Portlands, and just above it is the downtown. So it's less than a 30-minute walk to the central business district from this area. It's about 350 hectares of land, which are lying there in a relatively underutilized state, former industrial land, semi-industrial land, and there are reasons why it is lying there, which will be explained shortly. This land, though, it's interesting to realize is all landfill. The whole Portlands is fill that was begun in the early 1900s. The Don River Delta used to create what was the largest freshwater marsh on the Great Lakes system. That was all filled in with the idea of industry being able to move downtown and flourish here. And our brilliant engineers back in the day really liked the hard edges and the non-naturalized approach to putting the river in a concrete, very rational, rectilinear channel with 90-degree turns, none of which have turned out to be all that suitable for the growing flood risk that we experience. There's probably not too many of you here that remember Hurricane Hazel, but Hurricane Hazel was a hurricane-strength storm that dumped enough water on the Humber to cause major flooding there. Had that storm been over the Don River, we would have seen similar kind of washout in the Don. And that's what we have been asked to plan for from a regulatory flood perspective. And the channel that you see being built here in that photograph is not capable of handling that degree of storm event. It's also important to remember that Toronto really is a ravine city. We've got these huge green networks that come from way up north. The whole watershed that comes down to this lake starts up north of the Oak Ridges Moraine, makes its way down here through all of these green systems, which are also the subject of a lot of study. Evergreen is involved in a ravine strategy examination to look at how we can revitalize and improve public access to the ravine system, which leads everyone right down to the waterfront. And in the case of the Don River, the Don Valley ravine comes down into a very narrow channel. You see all that green kind of in the upper part of the picture, and then it kind of disappears, and you can barely even see where the river is. and eventually kind of squeaks its way out in between the Portlands and the downtown waterfront. So it creates a significant flood risk for most of the Portlands north of the ship channel, which is that long blue line. That's the channel that's still used for shipping as part of the port use. Really between there and the river, that whole zone, as well as some of the area south of Eastern, those neighborhoods are all still in the floodplain. So this project is about flood protecting the Portlands, flood protecting part of Leslieville, and really making it possible for revitalization to finally happen here, because it has been held back not just by flooding, but also by contamination. And what you can see here is an aerial photo from years past when much of this land was used for storage of oil and coal tar, and the remnants of that are still in some places in the soil. So we have to dig up the soil, remediate the soil, make it habitable and safe for people, which we have specialists on our team and consultants helping us do, and making sure that it's safe for the river to run through it. And once that has been excavated and cleaned up, we will then reroute the river and create the outlets necessary to let the river run free and stop flooding. For those who, some of those who are on the 20-year circuit, we have a photograph here. Pictured in the blue sweater is Mark Wilson, who was the former chair of Waterfront Toronto, way back in the day when he was starting up the task force to bring back the Don. So the efforts to do something with this river really have been decades in the making. I think this effort started in the 80s. In 1989, they kind of formed as a real group, and in 91, we had the task force to bring back the Don. So we have this amazing story of a community activist, river activist, who went from activist to chair of Waterfront Toronto, and Mark was at the helm for much of the time that we were planning the restoration and flood protection of the river. So I think this is a very happy day for Mark. I don't know about the Prince, but we were just speculating that if he becomes king, maybe he can come back for the ribbon cutting on the river. So after the effort in the 80s and 90s, Waterfront Toronto then came into existence in the 2000s, and one of our 4 top priority projects was flood protection. And the way we ended up approaching this was we launched in 2007 an international design competition, which was not just about design, it was not just about landscape, it was really a competition to look at how you combine flood protection, river naturalization, urban development, urban revitalization, in one comprehensive package. So we wanted one solution that used the investment we knew we had to make in the river to not only make a great river, but make the river something that would then catalyze the revitalization, redevelopment, and repurposing of the Portlands. And so that design competition in 2007 was won by Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, who continue to be working on the project to this day, and they will be getting up here to present their work shortly. They are the ones who produced the rather amazing model that is to your right in the room. And thankfully, even though it's been 10 years and they haven't gotten to actually design the river until now, they haven't quit. So we're really glad that they're sticking with us throughout this process. In the back on the screen behind me is a timeline of how we've gotten here. I'm not going to go through the details of it, but as Councillor Fletcher mentioned, we did our design competition. We then went through the rest of the environmental assessment process in 2009. We were very close to having a completed environmental assessment for a version of the plan that you see today. We then had the alternative planning process that the councillor mentioned that led to the Portlands Acceleration Initiative, which David Casturin led, who will be getting up here to speak in a minute, and the due diligence report and the eventual completion of the environmental assessment. So as of 2015, we had approval for this project. We're now into detailed design. So some of what you'll see tonight looks a little different than some of what was in the drawings, but that's part of the natural design process. I know Michael Van Valkenburg's team's really excited to be sinking their teeth finally into what do these wetlands really look like? What are the plants that are in them? What is the course of the river? How do we bring recreational uses here that can make this part of the whole ravine recreation system? And so that's very much what we're looking for your feedback on tonight as part of this process, as this design evolves. There will be more iterations of this over time, and we will continue to solicit public feedback as that happens. So that was a maybe not so quick history of how we got to where we are today, and I'm going to turn it over to David now.
Thanks, Chris. I've got a minute and a half. I'm kidding. So, Chris showed a bit of a video of what the floodwaters would look like in a regulatory storm. The blue areas here are actually what the flood, or where the floodwaters would flow to in that storm. You can see there's an area that someone in our office thinks looks like a rhinoceros, outlined in blue, that goes into the downtown. That's actually the first phase of flood protection for the Don. It was completed as part of the West Don lands, where the Pan Am Village was, with the completion of a flood protection landform. And that removed that entire area from the floodplain. We're now dealing with part 2 or phase 2 of the Don, Lower Don flood protection. The area that we're going to be involved with is outlined in pink here. That's the boundaries of our project site. That's about 290 acres of land that you see there, or sorry, hectares of land that you see that's currently at risk of flood. That will all be removed from the floodplain once this project is completed. I'm not going to use that. This is the project. So it's a number of different components. Effectively, it's the creation of a new river valley and the construction and implementation of infrastructure that is required to service this land in the future, as well as to accommodate the construction of that river. So it includes basically 4 components: the river and flood protection features, the roads and services, bridges, and new parks and public realm. I keep picking that up. So first and foremost, we have the river component. So there's the main river itself, and then a number of river structures, floodplain, landforms, valley wall features, and in fact, the entire area outside of the river will be raised by anywhere from 1 to 2.5 meters to bring all of these lands out of the floodplain. So that's the biggest part of the project, what we're involved with. And that's, as you can see, probably about 8 or 9 different components, very large components. The second piece is bridges. So we have 3 brand new bridges, the Cherry Keating Bridge, Cherry Bridge across the river mouth, a new bridge at Commissioner Street, and rebuilding the Lakeshore Bridge across the Don River. We've got new roads, or rebuilt roads. There's Cherry Street will be rebuilt in a new location slightly west of where it exists today. Commissioner Street has to be rebuilt, as does the Don roadway. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mentioned that we're actually raising the grade. So all of those streets are at current grade. They all have to be raised by, as I said, anywhere from 1 to 3 meters. They also all need new services. The services in the Portlands were installed 50, 60, 70 years ago to accommodate the industrial uses in the Portlands. We are looking to create new mixed-use neighborhoods, residential, commercial properties, and the services required for those properties are actually substantially more demanding than the services that exist to date. And then finally, we have not finally, although they will be built last, there's the new parks and public realm, Promontory Park and the river parks, which will line the river all the way from the existing mouth to the new mouth at the inner harbor. So how did we get here? We spent a lot of time, as Chris mentioned, in the planning, and once we had that approval from the province in terms of the environmental assessment, we undertook a due diligence exercise. So that was really to give us and to give our government stakeholders confidence that the schedule, the budget, the scope of this project could be delivered for the numbers and the timeframes that we were telling them we could deliver it. So we spent a great deal of time looking at the site, doing site testing on geotechnical and environmental contamination. We looked at schedules, we looked at cost, For all of the components, we looked at how should we deliver the project? What is the best way to reduce the risk to the public sector and engage the private sector to the maximum extent that we can, leveraging their knowledge and expertise? And then what were some of the unique risks and challenges that we would face? Here's just five of many team members that worked on the project. They're actually carrying the 7 binders that comprise the entire due diligence report. It's about 10,000 pages, summarized in a short 180-page executive summary, which you can all read on our website, and we encourage you to do so. Because it actually does detail very interestingly, but in a good level of detail, the scope, how the project will be delivered, what the costs are, how long it will take. We will be complete in 2023, or at the end of 2023. How much it will cost, $1.25 billion for all of this work. It talks about some of the unique challenges like the environmental. How do we actually deliver this project, which is, as Chris noted, going to be built in areas that were made of fill, and they weren't concerned about what the environmental qualities of that fill were when they placed it. And then over the last 50, 60 years, the uses have all been related to hydrocarbons and metals and contamination. So where do we go from here? Well, we're obviously talking to the public, and we'll continue to meet with you through public meetings. We'll meet with our stakeholder advisors, with our land use advisors and users. And we are currently in the process of doing a design. We will be expecting to get to about 30% design by the end of May. We've been to our design review panel a number of times, and in fact, we were there yesterday again for bridges and roads. Design will take probably the better part of the next year and a half, and in some cases 2 years for some of the work that we're doing. But we are under construction on Cherry Street. If you drive out past the Keating Channel, you'll note that there's actually a small island of stone that's starting to poke its head above the water. We've been filling the lake with coarse stone, what we're calling coarse stone, to create a new lake or a new landform for the future Promontory Park for the last month and a half or so, and that will continue for the next about 18 months. Starting in July, we will be beginning the excavation of the river. That will take, as you can see on this schedule, until about the end of 2023 to complete, or actually 2022. So there's a possibility, I'm not promising anything, that the river may be there for your 30th. I am not promising right now. So that's now on Facebook, so it's real. It's real news. We will then begin construction of bridges, roads, doing the naturalization, and ultimately the parks, and expect to have the project fully complete, including all the trees and green spaces that you see on that beautiful model by the end of 2023. So I mentioned we have started work. You can see the little island poking up above this barge, and if you've been lucky enough to see this show up about once a week or so, there's about 8,000 tons of material that we're depositing in the river mouth, or at the mouth of the Keating Channel. It's not a river mouth, the mouth of the Keating Channel, and again, that will continue through this summer and in fact through into next year. Chris, back to you.
I just wanted to point out that we've done already quite a bit of public consultation on this project over the course of many years. The environmental assessment process alone has a public consultation component. Some of you have been at many meetings with us. Some of you are new, but we have always attempted to incorporate the feedback that we get from the public as the design has evolved, and we certainly intend to keep on doing that. Some of what we've heard so far from the many different meetings we've had is people want to see vibrancy and animation, especially along the water's edge, more water-based activities, ensuring that access points and connections are good so people can get to the water easily, a focus on sustainability and resilience, which is in many ways what this project is all about, flood protection and aquatic habitat. Nature, more naturalization in the marine world, but also more green spaces upland in the parks. Creating views, considering a mix of hardscaping. We do need some hardscape plaza space for gathering, as well as softscaping. Preserving local heritage, which has really been a part of the planning for the Portlands since we began this project in '07. And creating more recreational opportunities, programmed as well as unprogrammed. And so what you're going to see tonight reflects this input in its sort of first iteration, and we're looking for more, hopefully more detail, more depth, more richness that we can build into the plan as we go. We also have a survey that is available online where we're asking people what makes a great park, and we've already gotten some responses to that. People have talked about wanting to engage in environmental stewardship, meeting their neighbors, an easy place to get to experience a new place, special features, special things that they can't necessarily do in their ordinary neighborhood life, and then other experiences and programs like farmers markets, wildlife walks, music, places to run or walk, and flexible open areas. So I encourage any of you who haven't done this, if you can find this survey on our website, you can fill it out and we can start to build an even better database of what people are looking for, what those kind of experiences are people want in the parks. But I think what you'll see tonight is that we've already listened to some of this and begun to build it into the design. So I think with that, I am now going to introduce the designers of this project. So we have Herb Sweeney, who's an associate principal at MVVA, and Matt Urbanski, who is a principal at MVVA. Matt was involved in this from all the way back to the design competition days. Herb has joined the team in the last couple of years, which probably feels like 10 years at this point, given how much work has had to be done. So I'm not sure which of you is coming up first, but please come up.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Well, as Chris noted, we haven't been involved in the project for 20 years. We've been involved for 10 years, and we are still very much excited about the phase that we're moving into, which is detailed design. And I think we're also quite excited to be here tonight to share with you what we think is the most exciting part of the project, and that's parks and the river system. And I think we touched on the overview of the limits of this flood protection project. The boundary shown here in pink, overlaid on top of the existing conditions photo, is the full extent of the flood protection project, including the parks, the roadways, the bridges, and the river system. And when we look at some of the design parameters that have been defined over the last 10 years, as responses to the environmental assessments that have been prepared and other planning initiatives, we have a series of design parameters that we have to use as a starting point for making some of the decisions on the project. First and foremost is addressing flood protection, and that includes thinking about the open spaces, the areas that we're creating within this project, and how they relate to a floodplain line. So everything below the dashed blue line there, topographically, is needed to address a regulatory flood event. So that Hurricane Hazel size event that could come out and flood that entire space in between those two blue lines there. And that's really important to understand, because one of the things over the last really looking at this diagram over the last 15 years, or between 1990 and 2005, this diagram shows the change in impervious surfaces within the Don River watershed is quite dramatic. So the dark black boundary, or the dark black shaded area, is how much more impervious surfaces there are in just that 15-year period that the study was taken. And through the work of our team and TRCA, looking at that flood model of the conditions upstream in the Don River, the potential of a regulatory flood event and how much area is impacted is quite dramatic. So one of the big drivers for the competition scheme that MVVA brought back in 2007 at this point was looking at those existing conditions, that hard right-hand turn that's been referenced as it hits the Keating Channel, and that the natural flow of the Don River wants to revert back to pushing out towards Lake Ontario. So the scheme that our office brought was thinking about redirecting the Don River and allowing that new realigned river configuration to structure the urban form, the open spaces that would be left to the edges of that. Part of that driving idea was that we would address flood protection with a three-tiered approach. One being this new naturalized mouth of the river, two being using the existing Keating Channel as is, and then thirdly, having an overflow, a spillway that would go out to the existing ship channel. So in looking at the full composition of all of the potential development that this unlocks, it creates a significant new series of neighborhoods within downtown Toronto. And within this blue boundary, this dashed blue boundary, would be the limit of parks and floodplain work that is part of the final condition of this flood protection project. So we're looking at nearly 100 acres, as was noted, of new open space and river edges that are being created. So as we, in the last few months, we've dropped back into the world of thinking about this project at a detailed design level. Some of the bigger challenges in finding that coherent integrated solution, first would be flood control. Two, the naturalization that's required as part of the environmental assessments. And then also the need for placemaking. So we've thought about these as real 6 big moves. One, that we have to think about the future connections, current connections, whether it's looking at the areas that would be like rail transit that come down through here, along Commissioner Street and Cherry Street. If it's looking at the multi-use bike path network that would tie back up into the downtown Toronto, the darker blue line coming down through here, or other secondary pedestrian trails that would link through this area, as well as where those moments of future LRT would be, which are the dashed red lines here, here, and here. Number 2 out of those big ideas was that we need to accommodate the needs of the community. One of the reasons we're here tonight, to get input. Out of the 10 years of work that we have been doing, we've definitely got a lot of good feedback, and we've represented that within the model and the boards that we're sharing here tonight. We've also been thinking quite a bit, as we've gotten into the detailed design part of this project, about the importance of spatial and sectional variety. So looking at how we can create a much more rich landscape by thinking topographically about that, layering spaces so you don't see everything at once. And then also the importance that this is something that is heavily engineered, but we can design that and integrate that by using those natural analog conditions and looking at things such as the sinuosity of the river in this image to the left, and how that can be still used to think about the flood event. And we're running models and analyzing how those conditions naturally occur and how we can use those, take advantage of those within the design that we're working out for the river. Fifth would be thinking about all the layers of this and how to orchestrate that in a complete ensemble. So it's not an engineer project or strictly a parks project or a roadway project. It's that they're all coming together. It's a collaborative approach, a comprehensive solution. And then sixth would be building on the sustainable principles that Waterfront Toronto has, thinking about the resilience of the systems that we're doing, how human experience needs to drive these landscapes. Those are all key components as we progress within the design phases. So as we've started to progress and refine the park programming, we've revisited how we think about the organization of these spaces. And we've identified 4 landscape types to help us think through that process. The first would be citywide destination. What brings people in? How much of that do we want to have in this park? That people come from a bigger distance away. What type of amenities, programming do you want if it's a neighborhood park? The type of space that people come to on a daily basis. The need for recreation, sports, and obviously you can't overlook that we're creating a naturalized river through here, so making access to nature. So some of the work that we've been doing over the last few months has been looking at that contextually, so within distance of the site, and what type of activities are already existing based on those 4 classifications. So within a plus or minus 20-minute walk, you can see a range of neighborhood type of park activities, and that goes from anywhere from some picnic areas, passive lawns, to community playgrounds. So we've mapped that, started to classify what types of program we've seen, how they're being used. Likewise with sports facilities, there's certainly some multi-use fields and baseball fields. Started to think about how those are being used and the importance and what needs more of in this area. Accessible nature, we certainly know that this project will bring a significant component that is underserved at the moment, because currently it really only exists within Corktown Common and the Cherry Beach area. And then lastly, citywide destinations. One of the opportunities that we see here is that this park system, this very large contiguous open space that is the anchor really to the waterfront, has a great opportunity to add what seems to be underserved as far as citywide destination type of programming. So you have Cherry Beach Park, which is a fantastic one. You have other spaces that are outside this radius that aren't within a 20-minute walk that we think are fantastic spaces, like the amphitheater at the Music Garden or the event space plazas that are down and around Harborfront. So we've started to look at those types of programs and think about how they could be distributed across the entire park. The prominence of Promontory Park, as it's been called for the last 10 years, lends itself to a great opportunity for this citywide destination type of programming, with the close proximity of the future LRT stations off of Cherry Street. It's a great moment to have those sightlines, those views back to the city skyline. Also, though, we think that there's a great opportunity of looking at Villiers Park at the very east end of the project as another moment that we could have a citywide destination that draws you to both ends of the new Villiers Island precinct, and that there's this pooling, the stretching of those other types of program from sports and neighborhood parks down through the linear spine of the River Valley Park system. I think at this point, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Matt Urbanski, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the things that we think the waterfront needs more of.
Okay. Okay. There we go. Thank you, Herb. I think you all have a good idea why Herb is in charge of steering this ship right now. I think you have a little good sense of that. I'm a newbie, of course, only 11 years on this. For a whole year, I was actually saying I was at 10 years, but now I realize it's actually 11. But we're here again to talk to you about what do we need to do to make this a great place? What do we need? What is the key to success here, all right? And one thing we know is it's not just one big thing, right? I think we've all kind of moved beyond a big Ferris wheel, for instance, and know that a great public space is not a public space, but it's a whole series of things, right? Some things you already have in Toronto and some things that you don't have on the waterfront necessarily. And so one of the things we started with thinking about and talking to people about are what are the missing experiences when we look at that context already. Citywide playscape idea, this is something that people have talked about. That is our Maggie Daley Park in Chicago that we made recently. A big event lawn. You have a nice one in the Music Garden, but like maybe a bigger one that really took advantage of the skyline views. Outdoor cafes, because everyone always wants outdoor cafes. Everyone wants to, first question is, where can I get something to eat in the park? And then picnicking is a great thing. This is our picnic peninsula in Brooklyn Bridge Park. One of the great things that you can actually provide relatively inexpensively and really make a lot of people happy. It's amazing how happy picnic tables make people. Oh, look, I could actually have an in-town vacation here, bring my whole family and spend the whole day. And so that whole mix of things. We have an opportunity here to get out and actually look back at the skyline, not just look from the skyline, but look back at the skyline. Big opportunity for that. nature play. And when we say nature play, we're not really talking about just only for kids, but like imaginative, creative spaces that really draw people out and bring them together and kind of expose them to new things and to have different kinds of unexpected experiences. Access to water. It's always funny, waterfront cities that have so little access to water because, of course, they were shaped for industrial access to water, and now they're being reinvented. And this is our Brooklyn Bridge Park, one of the many kayak launching areas we made there. And then nature trails, boardwalks, ways to kind of move through the park and experience it in all kinds of different ways. So don't get nervous that you have to memorize this whole list over here. What you get from this diagram, which is a more refined version of the types diagram that Herb just showed you, is what do you see? You see a kind of neat mosaic of different things all mixed together. And that, we believe, is the answer to success. I have to tell you one quick story. When we first started working on Brooklyn Bridge Park, which I've been working on for 20 years, so they win in terms of that, my time on that, we went to community meetings, and of course everyone doesn't understand what's going on, and there was a lot of apprehension because it was an abandoned industrial waterfront. Sounds familiar. And a lot of people hadn't been there, and it seemed very marginal and out of the way. That also sounds familiar. And one of the things the cynics used to say, which was a lot of them, no one's ever going to go to Brooklyn Bridge Park. That's what they would say, because it was a little distant. You had to ride your bike to the area, and it wasn't easy. So it wasn't an unrealistic idea to say that. Basically, though, through the consultation process like this, and I worked on that with Ken Greenberg, who I see right in the audience here, and with this, of course, we had an extensive outreach, and people talked about what are the unique possibilities of the site. And then, of course, there's just lots of good, clean fun that people want to have, right? Fun is always a key to success, too. And a lot of it is not that hard to do, right? It's just, you just need to do it. And so what this diagram talks about is a big mixture, or a mosaic of a lot of good, clean fun. Some of it you expect, and some of it is going to be unique. And guess what? So that's what we did in Brooklyn Bridge Park. We made this whole collection of things, one after another, and it's sort of the collage experience of it, the kind of seeing one after the other in an almost kind of surreal way that makes it extremely compelling. And if Brooklyn Bridge Park has got any problem right now, it's kind of too crowded sometimes for like misanthropes like me who want to just go out in nature. So anyway, they were wrong about no one's ever going to come. And we're going to have a success here too. One of the great things for everything that's coming after this is that the public space is going to be made first, or at least the phase one of the public space, and that will create the there, and it will kind of remove the skepticism, and it will make everybody excited. So obviously one of the things, this is again the BBP, one of the things we can do is we can make edges that engage the water and allow you to get close to it like this. We have fantastic, brilliant people on our team that are help us figure things out. This is an image from a river restoration done by Interfluve, who is a river ecology experts. And this is a reconstructed river. This is not just, God didn't make this originally. Anyway, maybe he's participating now, but not at first. This is near Chicago. This is a salt marsh. This is an engineered, constructed salt marsh. This is engineered biology and nature, and immediately after building this in Brooklyn Bridge Park, all of the fiddler crabs and the ducks and the people that come and look all moved right in. If you get it right, it will work. Here is this is Duffin's Creek. This idea of levees. You'll see this in the model. This idea of narrow fingers of land that separate the main flow channel from the backwater wetlands. They start to add a lot of complexity. You can walk along these on trails that you'll see in the model, and you get to experience that whole thing. So this is one of the natural prototypes we went to look at. Water access, I mentioned that, I talked about that already. Make safe ways and multiple ways to get down into the water. Nature exploration in all different ways, weaving weaving the design nature and the kind of civic landscape together. So you don't feel like you're just kind of going off into some marginal area, but it's kind of becomes part of the natural experience. Getting people into canoes and kayaks in safe ways. And how about children? You know, right now you probably don't want to put a lot of children right out there with all of the big boats and everything like that. So we have a suggestion that you'll see in the model and in the renderings of how to make a safe waterway that children can enjoy. So it wouldn't only just be eco nerds in canoes like that picture was. Nature exploration, this is our kind of elevated walkway we made in Brooklyn Botanic Garden, where you can go in and walk amongst the trees and learn and have learning stations and whatnot. This is another precedent photo. So the wetland then kind of rolls up and it becomes an upland area, and you get different species of plants in there, and then the kind of ecology between the wetter environments and the drier environments kind of works synergistically together, and we could weave paths and ways to go through that and explore that. Just another version of that. This is over in a newly made Corktown Common. This is totally an opportunity here. You'll see that on the model, this idea of an event lawn where we could set up. This is actually the opera rolling in with a temporary stage here. And in Brooklyn Bridge Park, they do every Thursday in the summer, they do an inflatable movie screen, and they run a movie there. You can get 8,000 people on the lawn, and it has the backdrop of Manhattan, but you have a really good you have a really good skyline too to be looking at. So that's going to be a possibility. And this is a smaller scale event lawn, and maybe we have different scales of spaces like that too. If you want to make people happy, I already said you need to give them picnic tables and grills, but also you need to give them grass and you need to give them trees, because sometimes they want sun and sometimes they want shade, or maybe in the same day, they want both. So plenty of this kind of thing is important. This is a kind of romantic overlook for your kind of, I was trying to remember the Ethan Hawke Paris movie, like sitting near the river and overlooking and having your kind of wan romantic moment. We need to have places for that in the park, and we can do that. Overlooks kind of getting high, in elevation, above the shoreline. And you wouldn't think, because, it's such a view, right? It's so flat and there's so much view, you'd think, well, what? But actually, when you get up, and this is sort of the lesson of Riverside Park in New York City, you get a whole different dimension, and then you get to look down on other people in the foreground, and so it's kind of a great opportunity. You could also have overlooks that are right near the edge of the water as well. The picnic terraces. We had a concept that we're also applying here, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it. We called it the in-town vacation. If you have something for everybody in the family, for the old people, the littlest people, and the teenagers, those are very hard to make happy, but you can. If you have everybody happy, you don't need to leave. You can stay there all Saturday. You don't just take the kid begrudgingly to the playground for an hour and a half, or as long as you could stand it, and then take them home again. You can go here, and the teenager can play soccer, and grandma could chill out, and mom, all these different things can happen at the same time. And then when you all change places in life, which we all do, right, then you can still be happy in the same place, because there's things for you in your different stage of life. Urban Promenade, you guys know about these. You do have some of these already, but we could use some more of these also. It's a beautiful way to walk along the waterfront. An idea, this is actually a beer garden, I think, in Austria, so we had to sneak that in, but, that's just looks like so much fun, right? So being able to do that, maybe something like, this is our image, this is our concept really for the Keating Channel landscape, to have this kind of thing happening with, commercial space supporting the use of a public way and kind of intermingling together. More wine and beer, because everybody wants it. And very, very cool architecture with very cool things to eat inside. And then public art. One of the if you make a great setting, then all the artists want to be in there. And the great thing, and this is part of a rotating temporary public art display that we have in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And what's great about it is it's temporary, and that's because you get very high quality things, and they change over all the time. And so everybody loves this. This thing, when this was in the park, you couldn't, if you went on Flickr or whatever and put in Brooklyn Bridge Park, you just got pictures of this, which says "Oi" from the Brooklyn side and "Yo" from the Manhattan side. So this is a York Key Plaza, actually, but the idea of flexible space, paved, sometimes you need paved space because, people will just wear the grass out otherwise. But flexible space that can be programmed, that can be beautiful when it's empty, but then also accommodate crowds and do so in a way that people that manage the space are happy with it. This kind of thing can happen in plazas. It kind of comes up ephemerally, and then it could go away in the winter, and everybody loves that. This is that citywide playscape idea. This is a picture from Maggie Daley Park, and this is an aerial that was taken the summer it was made. So the idea of really, as you can see, kind of making a fantasy play area that then is infused with nature, and it's just barely starting to grow here. This is the summer it was made. But this is another play garden aerial view, a part of Brooklyn Bridge Park, and this concept that we like to pursue is this idea of nature and play all infused together. So it's not just kind of a playground, because I make a joke that playgrounds are a place where I used to go to get beat up when I was a kid. But this is not a playground, right? We've worked with play experts named Robin Moore and Nilda Costco, and the idea that you keep the adults happy and comfortable is actually the most important part of the playground design. It's kind of ironic, but true, because kids, in a way, they'll have fun anywhere, but you got to keep the adults happy. This is our play space in Corktown. The idea of nature play, again, is not just for kids, maybe garden-like, imaginative garden-like spaces. Here we took trees that we needed to cut down that were on the site in Chicago and turned them upside down and made them into these fanciful creatures, and then there's little exploratory paths and fun things to play with. So you could see it being more explicitly about play and also infusing a lot of natural materials. We'd be interested in that, interested in what you think about that. Got to have this nowadays. Where else are you going to meet somebody, right? This is sort of like the dating capital of the world, and also for the people too. The adaptive reuse of the structures here. We have silos. We might have MT35. We're not sure about that. But we have a little firehouse. We have a bunch of things that we need to think about reusing. And then you might notice there's a crane on the model. Everyone's like, what is that? And it's like, that's a crane, and it's exactly right in that same location right now, actually. A big crane that we're looking at incorporating into the designs. So you take a look at that. You have some great examples of industrial reuse in the city here already, so they're inspiring. Multi-use field, a green space that many people can use in different ways and different scales is something we're looking at. Court sports, of course, because everyone needs to be exercising, and it's also a great social space. And this is, of course, how you bring teenagers in as well, if you have the right things that they're looking for. It's one of the ways you could bring them in. It's very successful in Brooklyn Bridge Park that way. This is, again, another way of doing that. One thought was, could this be something to do on the silos in one of the locations? I'd love to hear what you think about that. But this is our climbing structure made in Maggie Daley Park in Chicago, and it's managed by a concessionaire, so it's safe, and there's adult supervision, and little kids are there, and they even have wheelchair climbing. I don't know how they do it, but they actually have that. Every kind of thing is very open to everyone, all different levels of challenge. Maybe we could do something like that with the historic structures. This is sledding in Corktown. So this is where that all comes together in a more illustrative version of the plan. We have this in the model as well. And just going to do a few before and afters here. So this is looking east, sort of from the base of Cherry Street, what it looks like right now. Same view. Same exact view. So, so just to give a sense of that, explain a couple of things. This is one of those levees that I was mentioning that you could walk out on. And the idea of using some black willow trees is totally possible there. We're looking east now in this view. And so we're seeing the sinuosity of the river. This is actually a technical element here. This is called the Carp Gate. If Ken Dion was here, he would be very happy that I mentioned that. But this controls the evil carp from coming up and ruining all the wetlands. So this looks natural, but this is engineered with nature. Okay, so we're working very carefully with all of the state-of-the-art thinking on this, and so you get to walk over that, and then the fish don't go in and eat all of the plants up there. Here we are now looking west, and you could see the crane right there. And that's what that will be like. You're on what we're calling right now a picnic terrace, a kind of wall right at the edge of the wetland, so you'd look right off of it, and as if almost like standing on the stage and you're all the marshland down there. Oops, what did I do there? Oh, I want to go to fixed image. Okay. And so this is very accessible immediately off the street. One of the neat things that we get to do here, some of us, we're in Boy Scouts, or we're weird and we like going out in canoes or whatever, and we see nature, but many people don't, right? They don't have access to it. And so the possibility here is to really bring nature and culture right together, right on a line. You'll be able to be in an urbane environment and then have nature literally lapping right up next to you. And that's sort of the concept of the juxtaposition of a complete, you don't need to be wearing your Eddie Bauer outfit over here. You could just have your Starbucks and still watch this guy over here who's really into it. Oh, by the way, that was the other picnic peninsula on the other picnic idea on the other side. That's just an idea we'd love to hear if you like that idea, but they're kind of looking at each other across the way. Okay, so this is near the crane and an area where we're looking at making a part of the playscape there. And so we keep the crane, and we actually are looking at a way of making a safe canoe passage, safe for children, so it's buffered from the exposure of the lake, and that would bring you that's what's shown here, and there could be a kind of a complexity to the land and water intermingling, the idea of a big bowl, and these are some play elements that are beautiful, really artworks that are made by a company named Monstrum. We've worked with. They're from Denmark, but we could maybe do something like that. Those are sort of animal themed, as you can see. And then this is looking, looking east up along Commissioner's, kind of just south of Commissioner Street. And this gives a sense of the idea of intermingling a kind of softer feel with recreation. So, can we make it less more intermingled and less like a ghetto of basketball courts and then a ghetto of picnicking areas or lawns or whatever? But maybe can we start to mix them together a little bit and have one kind of support the other? So you could imagine being here and watching your friends play because you don't feel like it, but you want to go out with them anyway. And that kind of thing. And this was actually inspired by a park we saw in Copenhagen, where it was done brilliantly. And then we have an animation here think it's just, does it just, do I need to click this again? One more. So this is an overview, obviously. And then what I'm going to show you in a second is we've run a few different flood scenarios through here to give you a sense of like what people were asking me, what's going to go underwater? And we have the regulatory event, which you actually haven't had yet, at least in this location, right? And then, but you have lots of others, 5-year storms, 25-year storms. So we're going to just let that go. Hopefully it's going to work. Okay. Base flow, all the way up to full. That's full. That's regulatory event. Now we're back to base flow. So 2-year, it's just barely register it, right? Five-year, you'll notice. And that's going to go on for 3 minutes, so I'm not going to narrate that. I think what we'll do is do questions now, right? All right. So we have, Mia, you want to?
Thank you. They turn the lights back up without my even asking, which is great because I want to see your faces. So I know everyone has questions. If you do have a question, what I'd like to ask is there's a bit of a path through this block of chairs that will allow you to walk down the aisle here and line up behind this microphone. It's a little bit of a journey, so I appreciate your doing it. And if you do have a question, we'll be happy to take it. If David, Chris, Matt, and Herb can't answer it, we have lots of our staff here also in the front row who are ready and waiting to answer your questions. Go ahead. You can take the front row. We've got someone in the front row, so it's fair for him to go around.
Hi, nice show. A couple of weekends ago, I tried to cross-country ski on Toronto Island. It's not very well set up for that. I'd just like to suggest that maybe you think about how cross-country skiing might work in this space. One thing that's really bad about the island is the major routes are all paved and they get plowed.
The boundary shown here in pink, overlaid on top of the existing conditions photo, is the full extent of the flood protection project, including the parks, the roadways, the bridges, and the river system. And when we look at some of the design parameters that have been defined over the last 10 years as responses to the environmental assessments that have been prepared and other planning initiatives, we have a series of design parameters that we have to use as a starting point for making some of the decisions on the project. First and foremost is addressing flood protection. And that includes thinking about the open spaces, the areas that we're creating within this project, and how they relate to a floodplain line. So everything below the dashed blue line there, topographically, is needed to address a regulatory flood event. So that Hurricane Hazel size event that could come out and flood that entire space in between those two blue lines there. And that's really important to understand because one of the things over the last really looking at this diagram over the last 15 years or between 1990 and 2005, this diagram shows the change in impervious surfaces within the Don River watershed is quite dramatic. So the dark black boundary or the dark black shaded area is how much more impervious surfaces there are in just that 15-year period that the study was taken. And through the work of our team and TRCA, looking at that flood model of the conditions upstream in the Don River, the potential of a regulatory flood event and how much area is impacted is quite dramatic. So one of the big drivers for the competition scheme that MVVA brought back in 2007 at this point was looking at those existing conditions, that hard right-hand turn that's been referenced as it hits the Keating Channel, and that the natural flow of the Don River wants to revert back to pushing out towards Lake Ontario. So the scheme that our office brought was thinking about redirecting the Don River and allowing that new realigned river configuration to structure the urban form, the open spaces that would be left to the edges of that. Part of that driving idea was that we would address flood protection with a three-tiered approach. One being this new naturalized mouth of the river, two being using the existing Keating Channel as is, and then thirdly, having an overflow, a spillway that would go out to the existing ship channel. So in looking at the full composition of all of the potential development that this unlocks, it creates a significant new series of neighborhoods within downtown Toronto. And within this blue boundary, this dashed blue boundary, would be the limit of parks and floodplain work that is part of the final condition of this flood protection project. So we're looking at nearly 100 acres, as was noted, of new open space and river edges that are being created. So as we, in the last few months, we've dropped back into the world of thinking about this project at a detailed design level. Some of the bigger challenges in finding that coherent integrated solution, first would be flood control. Two, the naturalization that's required as part of the environmental assessments. And then also the need for placemaking. So we've thought about these as real 6 big moves. One, that we have to think about the future connections, current connections, whether it's looking at the areas that would be like rail transit that come down through here, along Commissioner Street and Cherry Street. If it's looking at the multi-use bike path network that would tie back up into the downtown Toronto, the darker blue line coming down through here, or other secondary pedestrian trails that would link through this area, as well as where those moments of future LRT would be, which are the dashed red lines here, here, and here. Number 2 out of those big ideas was that we need to accommodate the needs of the community. One of the reasons we're here tonight, to get input. Out of the 10 years of work that we have been doing, we've definitely got a lot of good feedback, and we've represented that within the model and the boards that we're sharing here tonight. We've also been thinking quite a bit, as we've gotten into the detailed design part of this project, about the importance of spatial and sectional variety. So looking at how we can create a much more rich landscape by thinking topographically about that, layering spaces so you don't see everything at once. And then also the importance that this is something that is heavily engineered, but we can design that and integrate that by using those natural analog conditions and looking at things such as the sinuosity of the river in this image to the left, and how that can be still used to think about the flood event. And we're running models and analyzing how those conditions naturally occur and how we can use those, take advantage of those within the design that we're working out for the river. Fifth would be thinking about all the layers of this and how to orchestrate that in a complete ensemble. So it's not an engineer project or strictly a parks project or a roadway project. It's that they're all coming together. It's a collaborative approach, a comprehensive solution. And then sixth would be building on the sustainable principles that Waterfront Toronto has, thinking about the resilience of the systems that we're doing, how human experience needs to drive these landscapes. Those are all key components as we progress within the design phases. So as we've started to progress and refine the park programming, we've revisited how we think about the organization of these spaces. And we've identified 4 landscape types to help us think through that process. The first would be citywide destination. What brings people in? How much of that do we want to have in this park? That people come from a bigger distance away. What type of amenities, programming do you want if it's a neighborhood park? The type of space that people come to on a daily basis. The need for recreation, sports, and obviously you can't overlook that we're creating a naturalized river through here, so making access to nature. So some of the work that we've been doing over the last few months has been looking at that contextually, so within distance of the site, and what type of activities are already existing based on those 4 classifications. So within a plus or minus 20-minute walk, You can see a range of neighborhood type of park activities, and that goes from anywhere from some picnic areas, passive lawns, to community playgrounds. So we've mapped that, started to classify what types of program we've seen, how they're being used. Likewise with sports facilities, there's certainly some multi-use fields and baseball fields. Started to think about how those are being used and the importance and what needs more of in this area. Accessible nature, we certainly know that this project will bring a significant component that is underserved at the moment, because currently it really only exists within Corktown Common and the Cherry Beach area. And then lastly, citywide destinations. One of the opportunities that we see here is that this park system, this very large contiguous open space that is the anchor really to the waterfront, has a great opportunity to add what seems to be underserved as far as citywide destination type of programming. So you have Cherry Beach Park, which is a fantastic one. You have other spaces that are outside this radius that aren't within a 20-minute walk that we think are fantastic spaces, like the amphitheater at the Music Garden or the event space plazas that are down and around Harborfront. So we've started to look at those types of programs and think about how they could be distributed across the entire park. The prominence of Promontory Park, as it's been called for the last 10 years, lends itself to a great opportunity for this citywide destination type of programming, with the close proximity of the future LRT stations off of Cherry Street. It's a great moment to have those sightlines, those views back to the city skyline. Also, though, we think that there's a great opportunity of looking at Villiers Park at the very east end of the project as another moment that we could have a citywide destination that draws you to both ends of the new Villiers Island precinct, and that there's this pooling, the stretching of those other types of program from sports and neighborhood parks down through the linear spine of the River Valley Park system. I think at this point, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Matt Urbanski, and he's going to talk a little bit more about the things that we think the waterfront needs more of.
Okay. Okay. There we go. Thank you, Herb. I think you all have a good idea why Herb is in charge of steering this ship right now. I think you have a little good sense of that. I'm a newbie, of course, only 11 years on this. For a whole year, I was actually saying it was 10 years, but now I realize it's actually 11. But we're here again to talk to you about what do we need to do to make this a great place. What do we need? What is the key to success here, right? And one thing we know is it's not just one big thing, right? I think we've all kind of moved beyond a big Ferris wheel, for instance, and know that a great public space is not a public space, but it's a whole series of things, right? Some things you already have in Toronto and some things that you don't have on the waterfront necessarily. And so one of the things we started with thinking about and talking to people about are what are the missing experiences when we look at that context already. Citywide playscape idea, this is something that people have talked about. That is our Maggie Daly Park in Chicago that we made recently. A big event lawn. You have a nice one in the Music Garden, but like maybe a bigger one that really took advantage of the skyline views. Outdoor cafes, because everyone always wants outdoor cafes. Everyone wants to, first question is, where can I get something to eat in the park? And then picnicking is a great thing. This is our picnic peninsula in Brooklyn Bridge Park. One of the great things that you can actually provide relatively inexpensively and really make a lot of people happy. It's amazing how happy picnic tables make people. Oh, look, I could actually have an in-town vacation here, bring my whole family and spend the whole day. And so that whole mix of things. We have an opportunity here to get out and actually look back at the skyline, not just look from the skyline, but look back at the skyline. Big opportunity for that. Nature play. And when we say nature play, we're not really talking about just only for kids, but like imaginative, creative spaces that really draw people out and bring them together and kind of expose them to new things and to have different kinds of unexpected experiences. Access to water. It's always funny, waterfront cities that have so little access to water because, of course, they were shaped for industrial access to water, and now they're being reinvented. And this is our Brooklyn Bridge Park, one of the many kayak launching areas we made there. And then nature trails, boardwalks, ways to kind of move through the park and experience it in all kinds of different ways. So don't get nervous that you have to memorize this whole list over here. What you get from this diagram, which is a more refined version of the types diagram that Herb just showed you, is what do you see? You see a kind of neat mosaic of different things all mixed together. And that, we believe, is the answer to success. I have to tell you one quick story. When we first started working on Brooklyn Bridge Park, which I've been working on for 20 years, so they win in terms of that, my time on that, we went to community meetings, and of course everyone doesn't understand what's going on, and there was a lot of apprehension because it was an abandoned industrial waterfront. Sounds familiar. And a lot of people hadn't been there, and it seemed very marginal and out of the way. That also sounds familiar. And one of the things the cynics used to say, which was a lot of them, no one's ever going to go to Brooklyn Bridge Park. That's what they would say, because it was a little distant. You had to ride your bike to the area, and it wasn't easy. So it wasn't an unrealistic idea to say that. Basically, though, through the consultation process like this, and I worked on that with Ken Greenberg, who I see right in the audience here, and with this, of course, we had an extensive outreach, and people talked about what are the unique possibilities of the site. And then, of course, there's just lots of good, clean fun that people want to have, right? Fun is always a key to success, too. And a lot of it is not that hard to do, right? It's just, you just need to do it. And so what this diagram talks about is a big mixture, or a mosaic of a lot of good, clean fun. Some of it you expect, and some of it is going to be unique. And guess what? So that's what we did in Brooklyn Bridge Park. We made this whole collection of things, one after another, and it's sort of the collage experience of it, the kind of seeing one after the other in an almost kind of surreal way that makes it extremely compelling. And if Brooklyn Bridge Park has got any problem right now, it's kind of too crowded sometimes for like misanthropes like me who want to just go out in nature. So anyway, they were wrong about no one's ever going to come. And we're going to have a success here too. One of the great things for everything that's coming after this is that the public space is going to be made first, or at least the phase one of the public space, and that will create the there, and it will kind of remove the skepticism, and it will make everybody excited. So obviously one of the things, this is again the BBP, one of the things we can do is we can make edges that engage the water and allow you to get close to it like this. We have fantastic, brilliant people on our team that are help us figure things out. This is an image from a river restoration done by Interfluve, who is a river ecology experts. And this is a reconstructed river. This is not just, God didn't make this originally. Anyway, maybe he's participating now, but not at first. This is near Chicago. This is a salt marsh. This is an engineered, constructed salt marsh. This is engineered biology and nature, and immediately after building this in Brooklyn Bridge Park, all of the fiddler crabs and the ducks and the people that come and look all moved right in. If you get it right, it will work. This is Duffin's Creek. This idea of levees. You'll see this in the model. This idea of narrow fingers of land that separate the main flow channel from the backwater wetlands. They start to add a lot of complexity. You can walk along these on trails that you'll see in the model, and you get to experience that whole thing. So this is one of the natural prototypes we went to look at. Water access, I mentioned that, I talked about that already. Make safe ways and multiple ways to get down into the water. Nature exploration in all different ways, weaving weaving the design nature and the kind of civic landscape together. So you don't feel like you're just kind of going off into some marginal area, but it's kind of becomes part of the natural experience. Getting people into canoes and kayaks in safe ways. And how about children? You know, right now you probably don't want to put a lot of children right out there with all of the big boats and everything like that. So we have a suggestion that you'll see in the model and in the renderings of how to make a safe waterway that children can enjoy. So it wouldn't only just be eco nerds in canoes like that picture was. Nature exploration, this is our kind of elevated walkway we made in Brooklyn Botanic Garden, where you can go in and walk amongst the trees and learn and have learning stations and whatnot. This is another precedent photo. So the wetland then kind of rolls up and it becomes an upland area, and you get different species of plants in there, and then the kind of ecology between the wetter environments and the drier environments kind of works synergistically together, and we could weave paths and ways to go through that and explore that. Just another version of that. This is over in a newly made Corktown Common. This is totally an opportunity here. You'll see that on the model, this idea of an event lawn where we could set up. This is actually the opera rolling in with a temporary stage here. And in Brooklyn Bridge Park, they do every Thursday in the summer, they do an inflatable movie screen, and they run a movie there. You can get 8,000 people on the lawn, and it has the backdrop of Manhattan, but you have a really good you have a really good skyline too to be looking at. So that's going to be a possibility. And this is a smaller scale event lawn, and maybe we have different scales of spaces like that too. If you want to make people happy, I already said you need to give them picnic tables and grills, but also you need to give them grass and you need to give them trees, because sometimes they want sun and sometimes they want shade, or maybe in the same day, they want both. So plenty of this kind of thing is important. This is a kind of romantic overlook for your kind of, I was trying to remember the Ethan Hawke Paris movie, like sitting near the river and overlooking and having your kind of wan romantic moment. We need to have places for that in the park, and we can do that. Overlooks kind of getting high up, in elevation above the shoreline, and you wouldn't think, because it's such a view, right? It's so flat and there's so much view. You'd think, well, what? But actually, when you get up, and this is sort of the lesson of Riverside Park in New York City, you get a whole different dimension, and then you get to look down on other people in the foreground, and so it's kind of a great opportunity. You could also have overlooks that are right near the edge of the water as well. The picnic terraces. We had a concept that we're also applying here, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it. We called it the in-town vacation. If you have something for everybody in the family, for the old people, the littlest people, and the teenagers, those are very hard to make happy, but you can. If you have everybody happy, you don't need to leave. You can stay there all Saturday. You don't just take the kid begrudgingly to the playground for an hour and a half, or as long as you could stand it, and then take them home again. You can go here, and the teenager can play soccer, and grandma could chill out, and mom, all these different things can happen at the same time. And then when you all change places in life, which we all do, right, then you can still be happy in the same place, because there's things for you in your different stage of life. Urban Promenade, you guys know about these. You do have some of these already, but we could use some more of these also. It's a beautiful way to walk along the waterfront. An idea, this is actually a beer garden, I think, in Austria, so we had to sneak that in, but, that's just looks like so much fun, right? So being able to do that, maybe something like, this is our image, this is our concept really for the Keating Channel landscape, to have this kind of thing happening with, commercial space supporting the use of a public way and kind of intermingling together. More wine and beer, because everybody wants it. And very, very cool architecture with very cool things to eat inside. And then public art. One of the if you make a great setting, then all the artists want to be in there. And the great thing, and this is part of a rotating temporary public art display that we have in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And what's great about it is it's temporary, and that's because you get very high quality things, and they change over all the time. And so everybody loves this. This thing, when this was in the park, you couldn't, if you went on Flickr or whatever and put in Brooklyn Bridge Park, you just got pictures of this, which says "Oi" from the Brooklyn side and "Yo" from the Manhattan side. So this is a York Key Plaza, actually, but the idea of flexible space, paved, sometimes you need paved space because, people will just wear the grass out otherwise. But flexible space that can be programmed, that can be beautiful when it's empty, but then also accommodate crowds and do so in a way that people that manage the space are happy with it. This kind of thing can happen in plazas. It kind of comes up ephemerally, and then it could go away in the winter, and everybody loves that. This is that citywide playscape idea. This is a picture from Maggie Daley Park, and this is an aerial that was taken the summer it was made. So the idea of really, as you can see, kind of making a fantasy play area that then is infused with nature, and it's just barely starting to grow here. This is the summer it was made. But this is another play garden aerial view, a part of Brooklyn Bridge Park, and this concept that we like to pursue is this idea of nature and play all infused together. So it's not just kind of a playground, because I make a joke that playgrounds are a place where I used to go to get beat up when I was a kid. But this is not a playground, right? We've worked with play experts named Robin Moore and Nilda Costco, and the idea that you keep the adults happy and comfortable is actually the most important part of the playground design. It's kind of ironic, but true, because the kids, in a way, they'll have fun anywhere, but you got to keep the adults happy. This is our play space in Corktown. The idea of nature play, again, is not just for kids, maybe garden-like, imaginative garden-like spaces. Here we took trees that we needed to cut down that were on the site in Chicago and turned them upside down and made them into these fanciful creatures, and then there's little exploratory paths and fun things to play with. So you could see it being more explicitly about play and also infusing a lot of natural materials. We'd be interested in that, interested in what you think about that. Got to have this nowadays. Where else are you going to meet somebody, right? This is sort of like the dating capital of the world, and also for the people too. The adaptive reuse of the structures here. We have silos. We might have MT35. We're not sure about that. But we have a little firehouse. We have a bunch of things that we need to think about reusing. And then you might notice there's a crane on the model. Everyone's like, what is that? And it's like, that's a crane, and it's exactly right in that same location right now, actually. A big crane that we're looking at incorporating into the designs. So you take a look at that. You have some great examples of industrial reuse in the city here already, so they're inspiring. Multi-use field, a green space that many people can use in different ways and different scales is something we're looking at. Court sports, of course, because everyone needs to be exercising, and it's also a great social space. And this is, of course, how you bring teenagers in as well. If you have the right things that they're looking for, it's one of the ways you could bring them in. It's very successful in Brooklyn Bridge Park that way. This is again, another way of doing that. One thought was, could this be something to do on the silos in one of the locations? I'd love to hear what you think about that. But this is our climbing structure made in Maggie Daley Park in Chicago, and it's managed by a concessionaire, so it's safe, and there's adult supervision, and little kids are there, and they even have wheelchair climbing. I don't know how they do it, but they actually have that. Every kind of thing is very open to everyone, all different levels of challenge. Maybe we could do something like that with the historic structures. This is sledding in Corktown. So this is where that all comes together in a more illustrative version of the plan. We have this in the model as well. And just going to do a few before and afters here. So this is looking east, sort of from the base of Cherry Street, what it looks like right now. Same view. Same exact view. So, so just to give a sense of that, explain a couple of things. This is one of those levees that I was mentioning that you could walk out on. The idea of using some black willow trees is totally possible there. We're looking east now in this view, and so we're seeing the sinuosity of the river. This is actually a technical element here. This is called the Carp Gate. If Ken Dion was here, he would be very happy that I mentioned that. But this controls the evil carp from coming up and ruining all the wetlands. So this looks natural, but this is engineered with nature, okay? So we're working very carefully with all of the state-of-the-art thinking on this. And so you get to walk over that, and then the fish don't go in and eat all of the plants up there. Here we are now looking west, and you could see the crane right there. And that's what that will be like. You're on what we're calling right now a picnic terrace, a kind of wall right at the edge of the wetland, so you'd look right off of it, and as if almost like standing on the stage and you're all the marshland down there. Oops, what did I do there? Oh, I want to go to fix the image. Okay, and so this is very accessible immediately off the street. One of the neat things that we get to do here, some of us, we're in Boy Scouts, or we're weird and we like going out in canoes or whatever, and we see nature, but many people don't, right? They don't have access to it. And so the possibility here is to really bring nature and culture right together, right on a line. You'll be able to be in an urbane environment and then have nature literally lapping right up next to you. And that's sort of the concept of the juxtaposition of a complete, you don't need to be wearing your Eddie Bauer outfit over here. You could just have your Starbucks and still watch this guy over here who's really into it. Oh, by the way, that was the other picnic peninsula on the other picnic idea on the other side. That's just an idea we'd love to hear if you like that idea, but they're kind of looking at each other across the way. Okay, so this is near the crane and an area where we're looking at making a part of the playscape there. And so we keep the crane, and we actually are looking at a way of making a safe canoe passage, safe for children, so it's buffered from the exposure of the lake, and that would bring you that's what's shown here. And there could be a kind of a complexity to a land and water intermingling, the idea of a big bowl, and these are some play elements that are beautiful, really artworks that are made by a company named Monstrum. We've worked with. They're from Denmark, but we could maybe do something like that. Those are sort of animal themed, as you can see. And then this is looking, looking east, up along Commissioner's, kind of just south of Commissioner Street, and this gives a sense of the idea of intermingling a kind of softer feel with recreation. So, can we make it less more intermingled and less like a ghetto of basketball courts and then a ghetto of picnicking areas or lawns or whatever. But maybe can we start to mix them together a little bit and have one kind of support the other? So you could imagine being here and watching your friends play because you don't feel like it, but you want to go out with them anyway, and that kind of thing. And this was actually inspired by a park we saw in Copenhagen, where it was done brilliantly. And then we have an animation here think it's just, does it just, do I need to click this again? One more. So this is an overview, obviously. And then what I'm going to show you in a second is we've run a few different flood scenarios through here to give you a sense of like what people were asking me, what's going to go underwater? And we have the regulatory event, which you actually haven't had yet, at least in this location, right? And then, but you have lots of others, 5-year storms, 25-year storms. So we're going to just let that go. Hopefully it's going to work. Okay. Base flow, all the way up to full. That's full. That's regulatory event. Now we're back to base flow. So 2-year, it's just barely register it, right? Five-year, you'll notice. And that's going to go on for 3 minutes, so I'm not going to narrate that. I think what we'll do is do questions now, right? All right. So we have, Mia, you want to?
Thank you. They turn the lights back up without my even asking, which is great because I want to see your faces. So I know everyone has questions. If you do have a question, what I'd like to ask is there's a bit of a path through this block of chairs that will allow you to walk down the aisle here and line up behind this microphone. It's a little bit of a journey, so I appreciate your doing it. And if you do have a question, we'll be happy to take it. If David, Chris, Matt, and Herb can't answer it, we have lots of our staff here also in the front row who are ready and waiting to answer your questions. Go ahead. You can take the front row. We've got someone in the front row, so it's fair for him to go around.
Hi, nice show. A couple of weekends ago, I tried to cross-country ski on Toronto Island. It's not very well set up for that. I'd just like to suggest that maybe you think about how cross-country skiing might work in this space. One thing that's really bad about the island is the major routes are all paved and they get plowed.